Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're watching this. This is another spring training edition of the Rosinbaggers podcast, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I got both the boys with me tonight. Ty, how you doing? I know the weather ain't great out there, but how you holding up, man?
That's an understatement of the year. I have gotten to the point now in my 36-year-old adult life where I'm really contemplating why the hell I live in a state where the wind hurts your face when you walk outside. It's not good here. SOS, send help. We have 14-degree below temperatures. That's with the wind chill, which counts technically for the temperature because if the wind's blowing, then that's how cold it is outside. 14 below, it's nasty out here. So I'm ready to warm up and talk some spring baseball.
Stove, I know you're feeling a little warmer down there. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, bud. Sunshine and rainbows here in beautiful South Carolina. So yeah, can't beat the weather here right now, bud. It's supposed to be like this all weekend. Got some in baseball news, some college baseball news. Got some South Carolina Gamecock baseball in town this weekend, so probably gonna hit that up.
Excellent. Yeah, it's kind of like an early preview to the spring, right? When we get college baseball, because all the college teams from the north always migrate down to the south. And Aaron, yeah, I believe you're in Texas, kind of southeast Texas, if I remember, or maybe southwest near San Antonio. But yeah, nice and warm down there as well, like Stove is in South Carolina. It's supposed to hit like 85 in my area tomorrow. And then it's going to get back in like the 60s. So like I don't know, it's like a bomb cyclone of heat or something. I don't know.
Oh God, I feel so. Let me pull out my smallest violin I can find and play you a song for 60s. Sweet Jesus, we haven't hit 60s since spring
of last
year. The longest winter ever.
I know all those northern teams are down in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, across the west over. They go down south for tournaments and kind of round robin games, or if they start some pre-conference play games, they're going to play those teams down in the south because it's nice and warm. We used to go to Cocoa at my JUCO every year and play like a round robin thing next to what used to be the Expos spring training center. So that was pretty cool. I saw Vlad Guerrero throw a ball. The craziest thing I can ever really remember seeing a baseball player do in person. He had his right foot planted against the right field wall and line drive home plate standing, not even a one hop, 360 feet, I think it is, to kind of like deep right field in that stadium. And he just buzzed the fucking tower without a crow hop or anything, just superhuman. I know Vlad's got several superhuman feats that we saw on a daily basis playing against other professionals, but that one for me it just blew my mind when I saw it. It still blows my mind to this day to see somebody just do that, because you could one hop, you could crow hop, and you can one hop it to home, but he buzzed the tower from a standstill with his foot planted against the wall. Unreal fucking human being. And the genes clearly, passed down to his son, who's quite a good baseball player. Anyway, all my aside over there. Let's get talking about the AL Central. We're going to talk about last year's maybe dud division surprise story with the Guardians going into the playoffs and actually doing well in the playoffs, and if they had another bat and maybe they're World Series participants, because that pitching was really, really good last year. But we had some real disappointments. The White Sox were down. The Twins were kind of up and down at times. And the Guardians just chugged along, and Tito won another Manager of the Year. So let's get right into it. We'll start bottom up like we did with the AL East last week, and we'll start with the Kansas City Royals. So a little bit of movement in the offseason from the Royals. We don't see a ton of this from them, but it's not really like they made a bunch of big splash moves in free agency. They didn't lose anybody necessarily off what we expect to be their opening day roster, but they added Jordan Lyles, Aroldis Chapman, Ryan Yarborough, and Zach Greinke, all towing the bump at some point for them, whether they be in the rotation or in the middle to late bullpen. And then it's all about the youth, right? There's a couple of teams in this division we're going to talk mostly youth about. And you look at Bobby Witt, Vinny Pasquantino, they're kind of the core of that young youth movement in Kansas City. So I want to go to you first, Ty. What are your thoughts on Kansas City this year? Did they make enough moves with pitching? Is this going to be enough for them to be a contender? I kind of said last year, if all the youth came together, they might be a dark horse, and I failed miserably in that because they finished in last place. Are they going to be any better this year?
Oh man, you hope so, right? Because all of the youth is in place, but all of the youth is in place, like you mentioned, on the offensive end. You have several good young prospects that came to fruition in the 2022 version of the season for Kansas City, and there's certainly a lot to be excited about. And just up the road, about 2 hours due east of here, is Omaha, and this is where we saw these guys get their start in AAA ball and coming up through the ranks. So it's been fun to be able to document their career in the minor leagues, and albeit short stops for guys like MJ Melendez, who originally came up as a catcher, and you still have Salvador Perez on the lineup. So lo and behold, there's your DH spot right away at the top of the key, or at the top of the key. I've been doing so much basketball. Top of the batting order
like imitating art, right?
That's right. For the KC Royals, and I really like him to come out of that DH spot, catcher with a lot of speed. Certainly give Salvi a little bit of rest on that offensive end when needed. Then you throw in BWJR7, who has just been a phenom. Maybe a little bit of a slow start, I think, last year, all told, for Bobby Witt Jr. I think we were really expecting him to go toe-to-toe with Rodriguez for that American League Rookie of the Year race, and it just didn't develop because it got off to a little bit of a slow start. But all told, everything by Kansas City standards, very solid numbers for the middle of the infield, at least on the defensive side of things, and comparable numbers to anything that they had. And so, everybody's excited about year number 2. Does he continue to take another step? And then Pasquantino, you mentioned, and Big Vin, just light tower power. You talk a little bit about Vlad Guerrero, and what some of the things you witnessed. This guy is just all man. He's just all muscle at the plate and has the ability to go yard on any given swing. And with that reason alone, with those youth pieces, I love the offense for Kansas City. And I think Kansas City is going to score a lot of runs this season. This, to me, I will mirror the Royals to where Baltimore was at a year ago. I think the offense is in place. They've got the young guns available at a moment's notice, but they're going to need a little magic, and they're going to need a little fairy dust out of this pitching staff. Here's the other thing that I really like about Kansas City, and it actually comes from the skipper himself. They get a longtime guy in the Rays organization. And what do we know about the Rays organization? Well, all they've been doing since the Rays have been in existence is making more with less. And I like a guy that comes from that organization that can bring that mentality to Midwest baseball, because right now that's been sort of the MO for the Royals, is if they've got a few pieces in place, well, they need to cash in on those opportunities, because they come so few and far between where everything gets aligned for Kansas City. The pitching is big question marks. If they can get solid enough outings, I think the offense is good enough to keep Kansas City in some games. But I'm not so gung-ho, even as a Midwestern baseball guy, Whitey Herzog, to give Kansas City the nod to get into the postseason. I think it's an improvement from where they were at a year ago. I think they take a step in the right direction. I think a fight mid-pack is certainly a realistic possibility for the Kansas City Royals. Now, albeit mid-pack in the American League Central is going to look a lot different from mid-pack in the American League East in terms of overall win total. If I'm going to go give you a number right now, Pacoda Tyson adjusted, I'm going to bump the Royals up a little bit from where they're sitting currently. Give me about 75 to 78 wins for Kansas City this year. Put them right.
That's a big improvement, Bob. That's 10 to 13 wins.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. So you mentioned BWJ and how we expected him to kind of compete. Actually, I'll tell you, my investment stack of his rookie cards says that I thought he would win Rookie of the Year last year, and he didn't. But I need him to win a few MVPs so I can make good on the stack I got back here. But
there you go.
Yeah, for sure. So Stove, what are your thoughts on the Royals? Ty's pretty bullish. 10 double-digit improvement. He's got them. I assume not in the cellar, right?
Correct. I have him sitting right mid-pack third.
Perfect. Stove, how do you feel about that?
I'm not as optimistic as Ty as far as the win total. I'm actually probably about 10 games less than what Ty's predicting. I'm about that 63, 65. And I think Vegas is actually putting them around 70, 71 for their win total. Let's face it. And Ty touched base on this. You touched base on this. They return all 9 starters, okay, in their lineup. They're young. But let's also face it. They've been rebuilding, and they haven't been really relevant since the 2016 year. They won it in 15. 16, they were still competitive. And then ever since then, they've been in rebuild mode, okay?
It's been Salvi and everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. So, and like Ty said, they have the young guns. You know, you had Bobby Witt Jr., who's a stud, who, like you said, I mean, I was in agreement with you. I thought he was going to win AL Rookie of the Year to begin the year and everything. But like Ty said too, they have 2 to 3 young guys in their farm system that could make a difference. And like he alluded to as well, you know, might have that Baltimore magic, you know, maybe come June-ish or so, kind of about, I want to say that was probably right around the same time that the Orioles called up
Adley?
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. But and I am in total agreement with Ty. I think they will score runs because they're young, they're offensive, they're good at that. But it's going to come down to their pitching and their bullpen. Starting pitching is okay. Their bullpen, I think, is where it needs some more work. They needed to go out and sign a few more guys, a few more arms in the offseason. They didn't. And we've known Kansas City to not be big spenders. You know, and I love the guy to death. Ty probably loves the guy to death. A true and true, born and raised Nebraskan in Alex Gordon. You know, after that World Series win, they overpaid for Gordon. But I think what they were paying for at the time was his leadership and his durability to teach, because they knew what they were going into, that rebuild mode. But at the same time, too, I think he probably would have gave a hometown discount for a lot less money, to where, you know, they may have, you know, they could have gone out and gotten some more arms since they've been rebuilding to rebuild around as well. So I got him finishing 4th and right around that 63, 65 wins for this year.
Nice. I'm right between you guys. I know we had this happen once last week as well. I'm right between you guys. So Vegas number is, I think, about spot on, right? And of course, Vegas normally is pretty damn close. I'm like 69 to 72 wins. I think they're going to get to about 70. I do see a bit of an improvement for them, an uptick. I'm not as bullish as Ty. I worry about the pitching, exactly as both of you already said. I look at guys that they're projecting as possible starters. They might end up in the bullpen, and if they can get quality innings from a guy like, I think Jordan Lyles ends up in the bullpen for them. I think possibly Jackson Kovar might have a year of seasoning in the bullpen as well. If they can get some quality innings from them, and if Aroldis Chapman becomes the guy he once was, or maybe not quite that, but anything close to that, and he starts to figure out how to throw fucking strikes, like, I think that they could have an okay bullpen, a deep enough bullpen to compete. But I look at the starting rotation, and I look at the top of it, and who's going to be their number one? Is it Brady Singer? Is he ready to be that guy? Is it Bubic? Is it Greinke? Because you don't want Greinke to be your number one guy. You know, he's 40 years old, and he's a guy that, for me, he's going to be an innings eater. And I don't know that, like, I get the sentimental piece of bringing Greinke back. But a team like the Royals wasn't in a position to bring in a guy who's a 5th end of the rotation innings eater on 9 to 10 competitive teams, and is a middle rotation guy for probably the rest of the league. But they just needed an arm, and you bring him back. So I'm 60, 68, 69 to maybe 72 wins is where I've got the Royals. I really look for, as you mentioned it, Ty, the slow start. I look for Bobby Witt Jr. to start to be that guy. And if you compare him with Vinny and you compare them with MJ Melendez, if he's going to be the heir apparent behind the plate and he can be a guy who can rotate at DH, possibly even play a little first base maybe to get Vinny some days off of them legs and let him just be a DH. I think that's a good rotation, and they're going to score runs, but I really do worry very, very much about this pitching because I look up and down that potential starting rotation. I'm like, fuck, this is a bunch of fours and a guy that might be a one if he ever figures it out, right? And I think of Brady Singer's a guy you still hold out hope. Like, God, is he ever going to get there? But I don't know that he's ever going to. He's been in the league in the majors now, what, 3 parts of 4 years, and just hasn't really put it together. So I'm with you guys. I'm right in between you, but I got him 4th like Stove does. I'm not quite bullish enough to move them up to 3, although I think that they're going to be in the hunt in that middle of the pack as well, because I think this division is going to be really bad again this year.
You hope so for Kansas City's sake. And you mentioned Brady Singer, and he's still a baby face. And you look at him, and it looks like he's we still have that vision of Brady Singer coming in as a red hot rookie and was the most touted prospect coming up through the pitching ranks. And you mentioned it; it hasn't developed. You'd love to see him take a stride forward and keep Kansas City competitive. Here's the biggest question mark, and I'll tell you, from being smack dab here in the central part of the United States, and quite frankly, Royals country here in central Nebraska, the biggest question mark we have is this going to be a Kansas City team that copy and pastes every other Kansas City team other than their World Series runs? What if they're out of the hunt by the All-Star break? What if they're out of the hunt by the trade deadline? And then you have those big names that you can ship off for some prospects and a rebuild and more farm system. People are very concerned because they're very excited about these young kids. They're very concerned with an MJ going to a New York Mets, for instance, with a Pascantino going to a lineup that needs more pop. The mindset is that Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be a Royal forever, but cash is a mighty, mighty, mighty talker when it comes to baseball. And the biggest concern is Kansas City needs to at least stay competitive through the All-Star break and be mid-pack. Otherwise, they could be sellers, and it could be a long year.
Yeah, for sure. I thought potentially if he hadn't struggled as much at the plate last year, that Selvey might have been on the trading block at the deadline as well. So he's another name that if he figures the bat out again this year, gets back to what he was in 2021 and previous, then I think you're looking at potentially another guy that might be on the block, and that'd be really unfortunate for Royals fans if they're sellers yet again at the deadline, and to lose some of this young talent would be real tough. All right, let's move up a rung on the ladder here. The Tigers finished in 4th last year. Not a lot of movement in the offseason for them. It really is all about the youth. I don't think they had really any notable signings or losses in free agency. I couldn't find any that made the needle.
Closer.
What's that?
Soto, their closer.
Yeah. I guess that just didn't move the needle for me to put him on this. So I grabbed some young guys because that's for me. I think, and feel free to disagree, but I think this is just like the Royals. Youth is what we're talking about here. Guys like Bedu and Torkelson, etc. Stove, what do you feel for the Tigers here? I have a feeling I know where you're putting them.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
I have a feeling I know where we're all putting them.
Yeah, they didn't move the needle at all this year for me. They returned 8 starters. For me, they're going to be dead last in the division, and I'm putting them roughly 58 wins. I can't remember what Vegas has them at. They did add 2 arms, but Lorenzen and Boyd, but they're going to be innings eaters. They're like sub 4.5 ERA, both guys. Their pitching staff is not, is terrible. Like, I think their whole starting rotation is 4 and above for ERA. Recipe for disaster right there. Defensively, they're good. They're probably top 10 in baseball, I would say, defensively. But the other thing, too, is they had 2 big names in their pitching rotation from last year. that had major arm surgery that are not going to be back for a significant amount of time. I would imagine probably after All-Star break when they'll be back. So honestly, for me, I mean, this is a no-brainer for me. Dead last, and like I said, I want to say about 58 wins.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the Royals potentially being sellers. I forgot about the Soto thing because it was a trade, and they got a bunch of like no-name prospects back. It was a big
From
four or five team trade, and the Phillies got Soto, which I think is a pretty good move for them. Lengthen their bullpen. Ty, any dissenting opinion on the Tigers here?
Unfortunately not. Detroit is one of those ball clubs that I think baseball guys can get behind, and they want to see be successful for a fan base that is bleeding for any whiff of success on the baseball diamond here with these Tigers. But it's not this year's squad. And Stove mentions the injuries. A year ago, I'm going through the American League Cy Young candidates, and I threw a dark horse in there just for fun when I was picking one out, and that was Casey Mize.
Right, yeah.
I love Casey Mize. By all indication, you mentioned the All-Star break. It might be the entire 2023 year. Tommy Johns is a shitty deal. So,
and if he's going to be in your projected future, and kind of the face of the club as far as the pitching goes,
be real careful.
Be real careful, and if it needs to be the whole 2023 season, then so be it.
Right. Well, and especially this season, because what are you jumping on? What are you looking forward to? Torkelson is a great bat and is a great prospect, but Spencer Torkelson is not a guy that's going to go out there and pick eight of the other guys on his back and carry a team to victory. Javi Baez is taking a step back, maybe even 2 steps back from where he was in his prime. Jonathan Scope, I mean, there's a lot of veteran leadership. There's a lot of guys that have been around the ballpark. I don't look at Detroit as being an embarrassingly bad baseball team, but they're not a team that's going to go out and shock worlds and win series and do things that winning clubs need to do. I'm with Stove. I'm sub 60 here on the win total. I have them just one more game. Somehow they find a way to win one more game than Big Stove. I got them for 59. But yeah, and really for those same reasons, their offense has a lot of veteran leadership. They'll play solid ball. Akil Baddoo is certainly fun to watch, and he's just a motor. He's a fast guy with a lot of power, but there's nothing here that reaches out and grabs me and says this could be a competitive baseball team down the stretch. What I look at when I look at Detroit, and it's through no fault of their own, it was a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. But I felt like as Miguel Cabrera was going on his journey for 3,000, and as you have a guy that's on the precipice of doing something so extraordinary, Detroit wanted to obviously have him do that as a Tiger, and they wanted Miguel Cabrera to be a Tiger for life and ultimately retire as a Tiger. I get the feeling like this is Detroit now in the post Miguel Cabrera era, where they're saying, well, now what the fuck do we do? Like, we're here. He's gone. We had no backup plan really ready to roll out. And now we're just getting all of the farm system guys, all of the prospects. We don't know if any of these guys are panning out, but let's just build up a farm system and see what shakes out in the laundry, out in the open air, in this beautiful course through the course of this 162 game season. But I have them losing at least 100 games. I don't see Detroit being competitive in the Central whatsoever.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Miggy's coming back for one more, right?
Yeah, this is his last year.
This is it. All right. I think maybe I misinterpreted what you were saying there, Ty, that he was already gone. So I say that because part of what my thoughts on the Tigers revolves around him, because he's been such a baseball guy from the beginning, and he's been such a big part of just the love for the game and the things he did last year, where like reporters would ask him after the game, like, hey, were you trying to get 3,000? And he's like, nah, I'm looking at the scoreboard. Like, I just want to win these games. I don't care. Like, that'll come or whatever. And like, that's for him, I hurt so badly because I was a Marlins fan at the time when he was there. Like I've said before on the show, like I've never really had super loyalty to a single team. I've bounced from small market teams. I really like to see like what the Rays and the Royals and the Marlins and some of those small market teams can do, the kind of money ball type stuff. And Miggy was one of my favorite players then, and D-Train and those guys that were on those teams. It hurts me to see, it hurts me to see what this Tigers team is going to be again this year. And you mentioned the roster composition. It's very, very weird, right? Teams that are normally this deep into a rebuild don't usually go out and sign these veteran guys that are semi names. They're like borderline names, like Scope. And it's just weird with the Tigers that they're not going to be able to compete. And Miggy's farewell swan song tour is going to be marred by the fact that I'm going to flip this and maybe sound a little positive, but it's going to be a super negative. Like the number's 105. And that's how many losses they're going to have this year, unfortunately. And all I can really hope is that at the deadline, there's a team that comes in and says, listen, we need a guy that can swing the bat a little bit, and he goes to a competitor. That's all I can really hope for Miggy, because the Tigers they're going to lose triple digit games, and it's going to be a long, rough season for them, especially because I don't think Casey Mize pitches this year. If they're smart, he doesn't pitch this year.
Yep.
Some bullpen sessions, maybe some appearances down in the minor league. Don't put him in high stress situations in a major league game. Let him do his thing, get ready for 2024. Because I think he and Skubal together could be a nice 1-2 punch for a Tigers team once they get to the point that they can maybe say they're going to be competitive. All right, let's shift up middle of the pack last year, and we have the Twinkies, who had a pretty interesting offseason. So the carousel of Carlos Correa, they lose him and then get him back eventually after the Giants and Mets realize, like, hey, there's an issue here, and his agent's kind of being shady. Go figure, Drew Rosenhaus. They pick up Christian Vasquez. They bring in Joey Gallo, who is going to be maybe the biggest beneficiary in the league of the no-shift rule. And they lose one pitcher. Fulmer goes to the Cubbies there. Stowe's got himself another arm in the bullpen. Ty, talk to me about the Twins, because I think we all had semi-high hopes that it was going to be the Twins and the White Sox at the top of the division last year, battling it out. Are they gonna make that step this year and move from 3 up to 1 or 2?
There's the potential, certainly, for Minnesota to be in a little bit of a dogfight here in the American League Central. I thought there was the potential for that a year ago. And Byron Buxton is sort of, everybody talks about Carlos Correa, and that was certainly the focal point of the offseason. Byron Buxton is greases the wheels here of this Minnesota offense. And as he goes, so do the Twins. And he's just a fantastic athletic specimen to watch, not only in real time at the ballpark up close, but also on the television set. He's a fun ball player you can get behind. He brings a lot of spark and charisma. My biggest question on Buxton is twofold. And one, and I say age as a 36-year-old guy, like it's supposed to mean something. I know I'm concerned about these guys getting up there in age, but another year, the wear and tear, the 162 game season on him, and it's starting to take his toll. He had knee surgery in September after the end of this year. How does he come back? What's the timetable for when he's really kind of back to full Buxton? You're probably able to get some workout here in the spring with him, but I don't expect him to be at full fourth gear right out of the gate. What was part of Minnesota's success a year ago was the red hot start that they got off to, and a large part of that was his bat. And if it's a step slow this year, and maybe they're a little slower out of the gate with some divisional matchups in the early going, that I could see them losing a couple of series, right away. It could be a situation where Minnesota kind of digs themselves into a little hole and has to get out. And, the offense certainly is there. You mentioned Joey Gallo, and shift restrictions, it'll be fascinating to watch Minnesota in how their offense will Joey Gallo find a place where he can kind of reinvent himself and reinvent his career after the tumultuous season that he had a year ago, essentially going from New York, and then New York didn't want him anymore and flies over to LA and has a little resurgence and then slowly fades away at the end of the year. Can he reignite things on the offensive end? That'll be fun to watch. And then, as we mentioned, you spotted him and highlighted him with his carousel that he did with New York and San Francisco. But Carlos Correa, all indications, had a horrible year a year ago. And to be honest, I don't think he was deserving of the free agency frenzy he created. As some guy that watches Midwest baseball, I'm like, I was horribly disappointed in his production last year for Minnesota. And if that's another year of similar production, the juice ain't worth the squeeze in the amount of money that Minnesota paid to get this guy. So the offense, it's set up for success, but I've got a lot of question marks on whether or not it will be. The addition of Pablo Lopez is interesting from Miami. I think the Pablo Lopez story is one that just kind of, he was so under the radar because of what Sandy Alcantara was able to do in Miami. And it was totally unfair.
He was so good.
Lopez put up ace numbers, but when you're being compared to the number one on your rotation, and the number one on your rotation put up video game numbers, there's no winning that scenario. So Minnesota gets a dub here with the ace and getting Pablo Lopez. Now, can the rest of that rotation get the innings and get the production that Minnesota needs? Sonny Gray needs to have a bounce back year this year. He needs to put some numbers in that win total. He needs to lower that ERA. Tyler Mahle, I've loved him since he was a Cincinnati Red, and his mechanic and his arsenal, but God bless America, he gives up a lot of home runs, and it's a beach ball when he releases that baseball.
You can't elevate at 93.
Right. So he's got to get some things worked out in some bullpen sessions before spring training. Again, the rotation doesn't have enough for me to maybe get the one spot. I think their offense can keep them in some games, but I'm kind of right along with this division to where it finished a year ago, and I think that this division has got some fun elements of competitive baseball, but I don't think it's those guys and those teams where they're even going to be competitive for a postseason spot, even if they get the second spot, which is where I'm going to put the Twins with under 85, call 83 wins for Minnesota this year.
Just over 500. Sneaking in over 500. Stove, what do you think of the Twins? You feel any different than Ty does about the Twins?
You said finishing second?
I got him second with 83. Yep.
Okay, so I have him second as well, but with one less win. I got him at 82.
Right, just over 500.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So, but here's a number that I want to throw at you guys real quick. Okay. 4. That's going to be the over-under in the first month of the season for the Twins of how many games get rescheduled.
Oh, yeah.
They have the whole month of April. They have one series in warmer climate.
Yeah.
And that's their second series of the season. That's down in Miami. Everything else
a lot of double
is above the Mason-Dixon line. It's Kansas City, it's Minnesota, it's Boston, it's New York, and it's Chicago.
Yeah. Have to be a lot of double headers in July and August.
So over under 4 for the amount of games that are going to be rescheduled. I might even actually go above 4. I'm going to go the over for the first month.
That's a good question. Ty, second place, Stove, second place,
no.
Essential enough to get in the playoffs?
No.
Not even in the play-in? Not even a low wild card spot?
Hold up. Let me take that back because last year they reformatted the playoffs.
Yep.
You have the AL East, where you're probably going to get.
We each had 3 teams in the AL East winning more games.
Yeah.
And I believe
I'm going to say no. I'm still going to say no.
One of us even had 4 teams in the AL East winning more games.
No.
Maybe not.
Oh.
I'm still going to say no.
So
on
no
this.
playoff from
No
Stove.
playoff.
Ty? Are they going to sneak into a wild card spot, second place in the AL Central? 83 wins for you?
I'll give him the 6th spot.
Ooh.
I'll give him the 6th.
Sneaking in. All right. That's a good question. So I'm going to spoil it and say I don't have them getting into a playoff spot. I have them actually finishing below 500. I'm at about 78 to 80 wins for this Twins team. I struggled really hard on whether I was going to put them in second or third. I'm going to actually put them in second in this division. My big concern is pitching, and I wanted to be super bullish on the Pablo Lopez signing. I wanted to be super bullish on this guy, right? Billy from Stranger Things, who has potential to be their ace there, and Joe Ryan. Good season last year, 13-8, 3.5 to 3.7 ERA. I think he's a good pitcher who could probably be an ace for them. I just don't know that he's going to be that guy that really is kind of give me the ball every 5th day and we're going to go win this fucking thing. So I look at where that shakes out after that 1-2 punch, and it's not good, right? So I think they're going to lose a lot of games in shootouts in those 3, 4, 5 spots in the rotation. I think they'll be fine offensively. I don't know what we're going to get from Correa, but I think the Twins lineup itself is going to be fine. I think Joey Gallo is going to have a big year with no shift. I think we're going to see really quickly how guys like him can now thrive in the major leagues because they don't have to learn how to hit the fucking ball. At 78 wins is about where I've got them, maybe to 80 as much as 80. So just below 500. Buxton, I am concerned, right, with the injury, but I think his bat is going to be fine. What I worry about with him is everything else he brings in terms of his ability to be a bit of a problem on the base paths. And if he misses time because he's, dealing with knee soreness or anything like that, that's a big bat out of the lineup, big leader out of that clubhouse. But finishing second, I'm gonna put them in at second. I'm still waffling, even in real time right now. I'm waffling whether they're gonna finish second or third, but not getting into a playoff spot. I'm with Stove on that. Finishing out of the wild card.
I'm gonna do a quick audible on things because I can do that, and because I was on the fly and I was under enormous amounts of pressure and I had to make a decision and I made the wrong one. Take the Twins out of the playoff spot for me.
I'll allow it.
They'll get 7th, but they will miss the playoffs.
Okay. So that's a little bit of a teaser for the AL West next week, huh?
Yep.
We got one sneaking in.
All right. So let's shift. And last year's runner-up in this division, the Chicago White Sox, finished at exactly 500. Once the Guardians got hot, it just seemed like nobody else in the AL Central was going to compete. I think the White Sox understood what they needed to do. They needed to get that rotation beefed up a bit. I don't know if Clevenger's the answer necessarily. They lose Jose Abreu, who's a big bat in any lineup. Stove, let's start with you, man. White Sox, any better this year? They can finish over 500, under 500?
No, I have them finishing third.
Okay.
And 74, 75 wins for me. Obviously, the big signing with Benintendi there for them, that moves the needle, obviously.
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned Clevenger. Because it takes us back to last year and a certain starting pitcher as well with the Dodgers, who was basically accused of DV. And when I say DV, I'm talking about domestic violence. And Trevor Bauer was suspended by MLB for X amount of games, a couple weeks here at a time, kept on extending it. And then it was basically the whole season.
Yep.
And there's evidence out there of so-called lady laughing, smiling on said night of it after she said it happened with no visible marks or no black eyes, nothing. And if it did happen, okay. But the proof has not been put out there. But yet Trevor Bauer was suspended. He was basically proven guilty without any proof. And the MLB suspended him basically for a whole season. Now you have Mike Clevinger coming over from the Padres over to the White Sox here, who is facing domestic violence allegations against his baby mama's kid. I think it's against the kid, not even the baby mama, but the kid. And if major league athletes and domestic violence in itself is, it's terrible, absolutely terrible. But when you're throwing allegations out there about a kid getting abused by the father, and Major League Baseball isn't doing anything about that, and he's still allowed to play as of right now. And let's face it, Clevinger last year underperformed. He underperformed. I honestly think that Clevinger will not pitch at all this season. So throw that one in the books. So yeah, and
you heard it here first.
Yeah, and fuck the White Sox.
Ty, fuck the White Sox.
Oh man, try to top that. Here we go. Yeah, fuck the White Sox. Here's me getting really small because of my prediction a year ago.
Yeah,
with Chicago. Hoodles, Chicago underperformed last year. The entire team was a mess. Tony La Russa needed to give up managing duties and did so a year, as it turns out, unfortunately too late. Probably should have hung it up a long time ago and rode off into the sunset and decided to get the itch back for baseball. And that baseball game had clearly passed him by. As a Cardinal fan and as a baseball guy, I have nothing but great things to say about what Tony La Russa did for the game, for his managerial style, for the Oakland Athletics, for the St. Louis Cardinals. It just didn't work in Chicago, and it's unfortunate. The guy's a great baseball mind, but he needed to give it up, and as it turns out, once he did, Chicago kind of took the reins and ran with it a little bit. Unfortunately for Chicago, adversity has struck, and I think the big thing for me is I would love nothing more to sit here and say Chicago is going to win 92 games. The Ian Hendricks diagnosis is a gut punch, and I think to everybody involved in baseball, because he was such a dominating figure on the mound and would come in the game in the ninth inning, and you knew you were going to be in for one hell of a gunfight with him. And to see something take an athlete like that, we think of cancer diagnosis and we think the frail and those who don't have great immune systems and who are already destined to be sick for the rest of their life. This takes a superhuman athlete that we were so fond of watching. And it's another sign that we need to curb this damn thing, and we need to do it Godspeed to those working in the medical profession on finding a cure for any cancer, let alone what Hendricks is going through with Chicago. My heart says I want the Chicago White Sox to win the Central and probably win the damn World Series, because I can't stand seeing athletes and superheroes going through things like this. You liken it. It's carbon copy from what Trey Mancini had to go through in Baltimore, and my heart breaks for him. And so, with that being said, obviously, my thoughts are with him and his family as he goes through his recovery. Would it be the ultimate greatest thing to see him come back and pitch in Major League Baseball? Yes. But the man needs to take care of himself and his family and his well-being first before we can even begin to have a discussion about what to do in Chicago's bullpen. So I'll leave the bullpen alone and liken it back to the starting rotation. And they've got some injury issues. You look at a Michael Kopech, and he came out, and this was a guy that had Cy Young stuff written all over his name. With what he was bringing into the MLB draft class. And it's been sideline derailment and 60-day DL stints after 60-day DL stints. And he has not yet got back to that pitcher, that amazing lefty with so much great break off the plate that we're used to seeing in his younger days. You hope he can get back to health. Giolito needs to have a bounce back year for me, for sure. He was the biggest disappointment, and another. I feel really small because I had him as my predicted AL Cy Young Award winner, and couldn't have fallen further from it. And in fact, fell completely off the rotation for a while there in Chicago while they were struggling. So he'll enter back into the rotation. You get a guy, a veteran like Lance Lynn, who's going to be an innings eater for you in there. Dylan Cease was dominant, and I think will continue. And not cease to be dominant again this year. And he's probably if I'm throwing 5 names in a hat right now for AL Cy Young Award winner, I'll throw his name into the hat. I'm not going to crown another White Sox as a potential predicted Cy Young Award winner because of what happened so fast last year. Here's why I don't have Chicago winning a whole hell of a lot of games. I'm actually going to go below Stove. I've got the White Sox finishing 4th in the American League Central. Thanks to my resurgence of the Kansas City Royals. I think Tim Anderson gets sold before the deadline. I think he's a big piece to the Chicago offensive lineup, but I think he is getting a lot of teams all across Major League Baseball salivating for a spot in that middle infield. He's got that dynamic ability, and he's reached that point where it's now time to go get some rings if you're Tim Anderson. And his agent come the trade deadline, if Chicago's not hanging around in the mix of things in the American League Central, his agent's going to be calling a lot of teams. And I see Anderson being the biggest move prior to the trade deadline, because I think it happens before we even start those hot deal talks in mid-July. I could see this being one that's an early exit and Tim having a clean break from Chicago. And if that happens, what's in this lineup besides just a bunch of guys that that play solid baseball? Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Yan Moncada, very good baseball players, but they're not guys who can take games over. They're not guys that are going to go win you a lot of games. Andrew Vaughn, he'll continue, and his career progression is one that I felt maybe might have needed a year and a half more in the minor league system. I think he came up too quickly and certainly splashed when he first came up, but now it's been to the point where he's had a couple of disappointing years and another one of those and falling further in the batting order. The Chicago team has a lot of question marks. Now, again, a lot of those roadblocks have been things completely out of their control and unpreventable with injuries and illness and a manager who was starting to deteriorate towards the end of the year. They faced a lot of adversity, and because they faced a lot of adversity, they're one of the teams that I'm truly pulling for, even though, no offense, Dove, I hate most of things that are happening in Chicago, including the Chicago Cubs. This is a role reversal for me. This is a team that I can get behind, but I don't see it happening. And if I'm being realistic, my heart says go win 97 games, but my head is saying you're probably going to win about 72.
Yeah, I'm almost exactly the same number, right? I had a range 72 to 74, right, for the White Sox, and it's for me, this team is sort of missed potential, and I don't want to get too sidetracked before I say well said about Liam Hendriks, right? We're all pulling for him, speedy recovery, kick cancer's ass, man. We'd love to see you back on the bump, but to talk about the team that will be taking the field this year, we're looking at a team that it's a lot of missed potential.
Mm.
Blue Bob was supposed to be a guy who was going to be potentially a 30-30 guy, really good defender, really good glove in the field, and potentially hit 300. Now, he's fine at the plate, but he's not that guy at the plate. Jose Abreu is not there anymore, a guy who's a 30 to 50 home run guy on any given season. Moncada's a guy who, yeah, he was fine, but he's not a guy, as you put it, he's not going to carry a team. I'm 100% on board with the fact that I think that Tim Anderson's gone at the deadline. I think he's going to end up with maybe the Mets. It might be the Giants, because those were the two teams that were in on Correa, and potentially they could see that at the deadline as, here's our last piece. We need to plug this lineup and really make a run. We'll see where they stand at that time. The Braves lost Dansby Swanson. Maybe they're in play, depending on how well, his name's eluding me right now, but the guy they're moving from second base to shortstop this year, how well he plays. Grissom, Vaughn Grissom, how well he plays this year at shortstop. Maybe they're in play for Tim Anderson. There's going to be suitors for Tim Anderson. If they're at 40 to 50 wins at the deadline, they're definitely going to be listening to calls on Tim Anderson, especially if, I think we've all got this team in first place. If this team goes and runs and hides on everybody, we're going to see a lot of selling from AL Central teams, potentially the White Sox really offloading a lot to go into full rebuild and you get that farm system in place. Because you mentioned Andrew Vaughn too, another guy who I think missed potential, right? Potentially might even move into bust territory here soon, because he was such a highly touted prospect. And it just hasn't worked out for him. 72 to 74 for me, finishing in third place, just barely above where I have the Royals. That could easily flip-flop. They could easily win 75 to 79 games. The Twins could easily win 70 to 73 games. The AL Central is a mess, man. In my opinion, I think the AL Central is a serious mess this year. Worse so than it was last year. Let's talk about the lone real bright spot last year from the AL Central, the Cleveland Guardians, and Tito Francona wins another Manager of the Year. I disagreed with him winning it, but congratulations, Tito. I love Tito, but I thought there was a better candidate in the AL last year. However, the Guardians go out they're pretty steadfast, right? They just gotta stay put. It's what they do. They didn't make big moves at the deadline and never do. Gone are the days of bringing in somebody at the deadline to make a run with Cliff Lee and CC Sabathia.
Yeah.
This is a very steady team, a lot like we see from kind of the Rays, right? They may be quietly the Rays of the Midwest. I don't know. But
Great
92 wins last year, going to the playoffs. They make some noise, surprised everybody with kind of what they were able to do. They just play good baseball. Solid pitching, really, really good in the field, timely hitting, and we bitched about it last year that nobody was willing to fucking do it. Guess who was willing to do it? Cleveland Guardians were willing to put a fucking sacrifice bunt down when they had a runner on second fucking base and go win a goddamn ball game. Ty, I'm going to pass your way first. Talk to me about the Guardians. I think we've all got them in first place again this year. How many games are they going to win? How far are they going to run away from everybody?
Man, I don't have him running away really from anybody, because as you mentioned with this American League Central, I just don't think that there's enough firepower and jet fuel to throw a team in that 100 category here from the Central. So I'm going to throw them right at 90. Obviously winning the American League Central, but again, I don't think they put Minnesota in the rear view, so to speak. I still think they'll have to play competitive basketball.
You are in the groove.
6 games, 3 days, guys. 6 games in 3 days. My head's mush. Go high school hoops here in the state. It's like Hoosiers, man, every day. Anyways, go back to baseball. They're not going to put the Twins in the rearview mirror. They're still going to have to play competitive baseball in the month of September when that calendar flips and close things out to get a playoff spot. They'll be the lone team in the American League Central to represent the American League in the postseason, or the lone team in the American League from the American League Central to represent their division. That makes a whole lot of sense to say they'll be the only Boyz. Jose Ramirez is a stud. There's no pitching around him. He's going to go out and get it, and he's going to put it in play, or he's going to put it out of the ballpark. I love the guy to death. Stephen Kwan's emergence last year was completely blindsided me in terms of what he can bring from the baseball standpoint. I thought he was honestly just a guy that they threw in there because they didn't have enough outfielders and picked one out of the minor league farm system and said, grab some pine and go to bat for us. Lo and behold, he was like hunting 400 in the first 2 months of the season. Rosario is exactly what you said Cleveland is all about. A guy that's just going to go up there and going to get 1 out of 3 hits. He's going to be a career 300 hitter here for the Guardians. And then you have the addition of Josh Bell, and he provides that pop in the lineup. Josh Naylor, I think, takes another step in the right direction. Another guy I'm excited about, and it's kind of why I'm a little bit less on the Seattle bandwagon, which we'll talk more about on the AL West show. Mike Zunino coming over to Cleveland is a big get for him at that catcher position, and because that was one area where I felt really watching the postseason a year ago was they didn't have that catcher that could really command the defense. And Zunino has that ability to command the defense. And oh, by the way, his pop in the bat's pretty good too. So he's going to get you some production, but he's got the ability to really kind of be the field general behind the mask and really work with some of those young pitchers in that bullpen, which is incredibly, incredibly youthful. And has enormous amounts of potential to win you some games late. And I think that's really where Cleveland separates me from the rest of the teams in the American League Central is what is Cleveland going to do after the 7th inning stretch? They're going to be able to close out games where I don't think a lot of the other teams in the Central are going to have that luxury where you can just give a ball to a bullpen guy and he's going to go out there and get you 3 outs and get your offense back on the field. Cleveland's got it. And their pitching staff, from the starting rotation is great. We talk all you want about Biebs, but Biebs isn't even my favorite player on the rotation. I love T-Mac and what he brings to the table. T-Mac's a front runner for my American League Cy Young Award winner. I'm throwing his name in the hat. He brought it last year and solidified himself, would be an ace really on any other staff. He's going to sit behind Biebs in that 1B role. I don't even call it a 2 role for Cleveland. It's 1A and 1B for me. And then, you throw Cal and Savali and Plesac in there. It's a solid rotation. The bullpen's young. Cleveland's going to do some things, but they're not going to get to that 100 marker. I'm going to sit them right about 90. And then you talk about the offseason moves. They didn't make a whole lot of splashes, but Cleveland, that's the advantage of being out front. That's the advantage of being the one that's getting hunted and knowing exactly where your hunters are. It's like every time I go deer hunting, I'm pretty damn sure the thing knows where I am because I can never find him, but he's like got me spotted. They're sitting there watching the rest of the American League Central with their feet on their desk, and they're saying, well, if they're not going to budge and move their lineup in any sort of direction, and we finished 10 games ahead of them last year, I think we'll be okay. Let's not go out and spend a lot of money if we don't have to. Let's wait and see if, who makes the first flinch. And the only flinch that I saw in the entire American League Central in the offseason was a flinch to get a player that you had on your roster to begin with, which doesn't really make it a flinch at all. So Cleveland didn't have to make a move. Cleveland's going to stay out in front in the Central. The whole makeup and shakeup from a year ago doesn't change in my book really whatsoever other than the placing of the teams. The disappointing results in the final standings will ultimately say that this division took a step back in 2023.
For sure. Stove, agree? Disagree?
I'm right there with Ty, first place, and I'm actually going 1 game less. I'm going 89 wins for them. Very solid defensively. Ty mentioned Stephen Kwan. Then you also had Andres Jimenez, solid defensively. And Ty mentioned Bieber and T-Mac. And really, it is a 1A, 1B because T-Mac's ERA is 0.05 points more than Bieber. So they have they return all their starting pitchers from last year. Bullpen is pretty solid as well. defensively, I mean, you would think that in a division where you have the Tigers and the Royals, at that below the 60s and mid to low 60 win totals for some of us for the projections, that you would possibly see the Guardians get into 90 and plus, maybe even surpass their 92 win totals from last year. But unfortunately, I just don't see it. And I'm going to save a closing remark for the closing remark here in just a little bit. So I'm with Ty, first place, but I'm going one game less.
I'm actually quite a bit more bullish on the Guardians than you two, and I'm a little surprised by that. Yeah, I just think the rest of the AL Central didn't do enough, honestly. As Ty put it, like, they kicked their feet up and said, if you're not going to do it, we're not going to do it. We like what we got. I love the roster composition for the Guardians. You mentioned the 1A, 1B. You're looking at those two guys and then three guys behind them that are mid to high rotation guys on several other teams across Major League Baseball. I love the Zunino pickup. You mentioned it, Ty. Catcher was a little bit of a weak spot for them last year. Not only does he bring playoff experience, World Series experience, leadership in that locker room, that clubhouse, but also he brings some pop to the lineup. And I think he's going to be able to rotate with some younger guys, potentially, maybe hit DH, maybe get a day off here and there. I don't think the Guardians start as slow as they did last year. So for that reason, I actually have them winning 101 games. I have them at 101 wins this year. I've got the rest of the AL Central getting the shit beat out of them by Cleveland. I mean, I've got fucking 52 wins from the Tigers and 60 wins, from 68 or so wins from the Royals. There's just a lot of wins to be gotten for Cleveland. I second place is going to finish 20 games out.
Right.
I think Cleveland's going to be playing prepare for playoff baseball for most of September, to be completely honest. I just think that they're gonna run away at the deadline. They're gonna run away at the All-Star break, and they're gonna be looking in the rearview mirror saying, okay, let's get our rotation set up. Let's make sure guys are healthy. Let's make sure everybody is prepared, get them the right amount of at-bats, the right amount of rest, the right amount of pitches, the right amount of innings, the right amount of appearances, because we all know Tito's the fucking puppet master when it comes to working the bullpen. He's going to be able to be that guy in September that really just gets this team ready for the playoffs. I don't want to spoil too much, but I'm really, really high on the Guardians in the American League, not just the AL Central this year.
Ooh. You can tell.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not a Rangers thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. So before we get to closing remarks, I want to do a real quick segue here. I want to do salute to service before we close up shop. Every episode we dedicate to a fallen service member. It is our Folds of Honor salute to service. All right, tonight's episode goes out to Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James C. Willis. Willis died June 26, 2021, serving during Operation Inherent Resolve. At the time of his death, Lieutenant Colonel Willis was 55 and hailed out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was attached to U.S. Air Force's Central Command at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James Willis, we have the watch. All right, so I think in order of sequence here, I'm going to go to Stowe first for some closing remarks, and then I'm going to let Ty bring us home today. What do you got for us, though?
So you started mentioning it a little bit, and the reason why the Guardians are going to separate themselves is because the guy that is the puppet master that you alluded to. That is what's going to win the Guardians the division this year.
I love Tito, man. I love Tito. Beard Chicken kind of gave him a bad name, but he did so many good things in Boston, and he's doing the same shit in Cleveland.
Exactly.
They're competitive with the since he's been there, they've been competitive with Boston. Really shouldn't have been competitive. So absolutely, Puppet Master Tito. Stove's on board. I like it. Here we go. Let's go, Tito. All right, Ty, buddy. Bring us home.
Man, I'm a radio guy, and I'm a radio guy, and today and this week, it completely validated that for me. Why I fucking hate TV. Because they don't play any goddamn baseball. Goddamn baseball. It's Ash Wednesday. I held it back.
Yep.
I scaled her back today.
I got you.
One pod only. Are we scaling back the GDs? Here's the problem with television networks, and they get on their high horse and get on Twitter and like bringing you more college baseball than ever before. And then I go to my home team, the Nebraska Huskers, in a Power 5 conference, Big Ten baseball, which I get is like the epitome of, Pac-12 football. It just really doesn't exist because we have a lot of teams that play in the cold here and they don't like the cold. And so we don't need any recruits, and it's Big Ten baseball. But damn it, the Huskers have some staying power, having had a couple trips to the College World Series, and Nebraska being the home of the College World Series. Should be college baseball mecca, but it's not, because the Huskers and similar to a lot of other teams across the country suffer from being completely untelevised in college baseball. For the love of God, these television networks with multiple streaming platforms, from ESPN2 to ESPN Plus to ESPN de Ocho to Fox Sports 1 to Fox Sports 2 now, there is an infinite number of streaming channels that you can put games on. And I don't care if it's Bob Costas on the microphone, throw a college kid, put it on ESPN Plus, find a way to bring us more baseball at the collegiate level, because God dang it, it's fun. The College World Series in the postseason, they're going around and they do a great job, but we get no lead up to the postseason, and we're just sort of supposed to figure out who these fucking 64 teams are. I'm sorry. I'm tired of it. And you have a Big Ten opponent with buku bucks to spend. Advertising dollars could come out the wazoo for the Big Ten Network. The Big Ten Network is putting 4. You mentioned it earlier. 4 big numbers, Stove, with the over-unders. 4, the same number Alex Gordon. They're televising 4 baseball games. ESPN2, friendly, they're going to pick up 1 against Penn State. We have 1 game on the ESPN networks. We also, here in Nebraska, have 4 games on our public media television station, which is great unless you are a Hulu Plus subscriber, in which case you don't even get access to public media. 9 fucking baseball games for a Power 5 school is embarrassing. And what's even more embarrassing is the fact that the Big Ten Network and ESPN go out there on Twitter and saying, bringing you more baseball than ever before. We have 9 televised Husker games this year. Like, we're supposed to be excited about it. Fuck you. That's bullshit. I demand more baseball.